This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo. This week, we here at Deconstructing Comics round out our look at what's going on in our own lives comics-wise. I'll talk to podcast co-founder Brandon on the benefits of getting some drawing into your daily routine, and Kumar, who's back to full-time manga translation for several different companies, and he'll walk us through all the series he's worked on recently in what amounts to a mini review of each. Also, I'll talk about what I've been doing behind the scenes of this podcast and with my English study materials, including a comic I scripted. Brandon in a moment, but first a reminder that this podcast needs your support. You can help by making your Amazon purchases through deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon. We get a cut of Amazon's profit, which helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of assembling this show every week. Now I'm talking with Brandon, who hasn't been on the podcast in a while, but he is one of the co-founders of the show. How's it going?
It's good. It's good.
Now, Brandon, of course, well, way back before the podcast, Brandon and I were Mulele's students in a comics drawing class. And I noticed recently on Facebook you've been posting a lot of your drawings. Have you been making a concerted effort to draw recently?
Yeah, so I picked up this book from 3D Total Publishing by Scott Robertson, I think his name is. And it's just a how to draw book. He mostly does vehicles and sci-fi ships and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. But I think he's a teacher, maybe at the Pasadena School of Design.
Okay.
And while I was reading through it, and it's really kind of an interactive book. It's really cool because you can use the app to use your phone or your iPad or whatever over certain panels that they have in the book, and it'll pull up videos. And one of the things that he was talking about was his drawing techniques and the need to practice on a regular basis. And of course, any experts will tell you that if you want to master a craft, it takes a lot of practice, around 10,000 hours to get to that point. Mm-hmm. And I've drawn a lot over the years, but, with life getting as busy as it does, sometimes it's hard to really continue to practice on a regular basis. You and Mulele have definitely put in a lot of work and time. Mulele specifically because he's working in that industry. I'm not.
Yeah.
So
well,
I've
barely drawn a comic in about almost 10 years now. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So I decided that it was pretty early in the year that I was going to try to fill up a couple sketchbooks over the course of the year. Mm-hmm. And the plan was to keep everything realistic. I would do a drawing a day, a sketch a day, for 5 days a week. That way, if I miss 1 or 2 days, that it would be okay.
Okay.
So for the first 5 months, I was really, really consistent. So that took me into late May, early June. And then I had to go back to the States to take care of some family business. And I haven't picked back up yet, but I've filled one sketchbook completely and about half of another one. So there's roughly about 150 sketches that I've done so far.
What kinds of things have you been drawing? Mostly people, I think. Yeah.
It's mostly people and portraits and that sort of thing. So initially, I was really interested in the techniques that he had in his book. So there was a lot of vehicles and kind of I was experimenting with concept art as far as costume design and that kind of thing. I did some mech and some stormtrooper redesigns and that sort of thing. And the technique is what has been uniform throughout the sketchbook. is you start out with alcohol-based markers, so Copic markers or whatever the sketch, Tombow markers, whatever, and start with a light shade of gray, the lightest shade, not necessarily the lightest shade you can get, a shade that's very light that you can build upon later. So the technique is not to get out a pencil and to sketch in rough lines and that kind of thing. What I've been trying to do is go in and assess everything tonally. So I'll set up some of the guidelines with that lighter marker, but then I start filling in the shades more and more until I get to the point where I've got most of the volume defined, and then I go in with a black pen and kind of knock out some of the details.
Okay.
And it started out, like I said, doing vehicles and the stuff that was kind of specifically addressed in this book. And then it moved into some people requesting on Facebook, hey, can you draw me this? Can you draw me a picture of that?
I see.
And then when I don't have any requests, what I've been doing is just doing a search on Google for icons of the 20th or the 21st century.
So famous people.
Yeah. So I really admired when I was in high school and into college. I had some fellow students who would do portraits of like Bruce Lee, and I always wanted to do some really good portraits of Muhammad Ali, and Audrey Hepburn, and that kind of thing. And I wasn't good. I figured once I had kind of gotten pretty good at this technique that maybe I could start to work on likenesses and that kind of thing. And I think if I was looking at kind of a percentage, it's about 90% of the time I get a really good likeness, and then 10% it's close. It's not quite right, but pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Bruce Lee, I did a couple of pictures with Bruce Lee, some kind of figure studies, and then the others portraits, and the portraits came out. Those were the ones that I was the most pleased with.
Okay.
Audrey Hepburn was a little bit off. You could tell it was her, and everybody on Facebook kind of knew it was her. But looking at it, the nose isn't right.
I see.
Muhammad Ali was pretty close to spot on. And that was probably 2 weeks before he passed away.
Oh, interesting.
His portrait. Yeah, so I had one friend on Facebook say, "Oh, great! Now all your sketches have turned into a death note."
Did you draw any pictures of Prince like at the beginning of the year?
No.
David Bowie?
I considered doing David Bowie. I haven't done one yet. But I think he passed away even before I started the sketchbook.
Yeah, I think it was January, I think.
Yeah, I think I started the sketchbooks in the middle to end of January.
So have you, do you feel a difference in your art from when you started this to now?
Yeah, I really do. So not only has the quality and the likenesses improved, but I can do it a lot faster. So I kind of know where everything needs to go, and with that first pen, usually I'm using a Copic sketch marker with if I'm doing a cool gray, it'll be either a cool 1 or a cool 2. So C1 or C2. I can really get the likeness down really kind of quickly. So I've had a couple of friends request that I do a portrait of a family member or something like that, and I was able to bang one out, and it looked a lot. I mean, it was really, really close. Within about 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So it kind of reminds me of, how you see in fairs and carnivals and amusement parks, and sometimes in those performance art streets, you'll have a caricature artist that's there, and they can work incredibly fast.
Yeah.
And the likenesses are good, but they're cartoony, right? I think I'm getting to the point where my speed and efficiency is pretty close to what they're doing, but it's not. I have a distinctive style, but it's not as stylistic or abstract as the cartoonist, the caricature artist.
Yeah, I'm just
I'm very pleased with how fast I'm working now.
looking back through your stuff on Facebook. The Lincoln is really good.
Oh yeah, I like
Lincoln.
that one too.
And there's a Yoda here, definitely Yoda.
That was I have. You remember Micro Machines?
Micro Machines.
They're these little tiny cars and toys where they became Action Fleet at some point, and somewhere in there in the 1990s, I think, they came out with a series of Star Wars vehicles.
Oh.
And then they started making playsets, and the playsets were the heads of characters from Star Wars. And I have most of them from that series. I think I have all of them, as a matter of fact, the heads. And I had Yoda, so I just pulled Yoda's aside and did a quick study on him.
I see. And then there's a dragon here. Was this just kind of out of your imagination, or was this a specific dragon?
I think I've done a couple of dragons. The very first one, which was the very first sketch in my book, in the first book, is strictly out of my imagination. So I sat down and I decided I was going to try out that technique with the markers and that kind of thing. And I just drew that from scratch.
Okay.
But I've drawn lots of dragons over the years, so that's one of the subject matters that I'm probably most comfortable with drawing.
Yeah, you have. I remember seeing some in the past.
So I think that was a good start for me because it gave me an opportunity to kind of experiment with the medium, but I already understand the subject. So it's I want to say it's similar to what some people do with whiskey or beer tasting, is that this might sound weird, but they know their own body odor, so they'll use that as that base reference to bring them back, so they can identify the next flavor. So I saw it on a TV special, a documentary, that in Germany, when you're tasting beers, in between beers, they would sniff their armpits. But basically what that does is it resets your senses. You know what your body smells like, and when it comes to drawing, I know what I'm capable of drawing when it comes to dragons.
I see.
So the variable is not necessarily the subject matter, it's the medium that I'm using. So I experimented a little bit with that one, and then progressively changed the subject matter as I got more comfortable with the medium.
I see. Okay, so you going to be getting back into the habit here now, or
yeah, now that I'm back,
yeah.
I will only be able to probably allow about 30 minutes a day, 15 to 30 minutes a day maximum for the sketches, because I have some other things going on.
Okay, well, I'll be keeping my eye on your Facebook then.
Yeah, I also did some still lifes of like whiskey bottles and that sort of thing. I was concentrating on reflections and volume, and the markers really worked very well for that. I was able to go back in once I had established like the darker tones and established light, and I used some white colored pencil or like a whiteout to kind of bring some of the highlights out too. So I really enjoyed that.
Okay.
But I think I will be getting more into. I'm going to do some more of I want to do a series of the icons, whether it's from film or from just American pop culture. So I did one of Jack Nicholson. I did Muhammad Ali, which I mentioned. I did Clint Eastwood. I did, what's his name? Rutger Hauer from Blade Runner, Kurt Cobain, and a couple others. So I'll be looking for probably the top 10. So if you have any suggestions, or if any of your viewers have any suggestions for icons of the 20th century or 21st century, you can let me know.
Okay. See some of Brandon's work in the show notes at deconstructingcomics.com, as well as a link to buy Scott Robertson's How to Draw through our Amazon Associates link. Coming up, Kumar on the manga titles he's translated recently for 4 different publishers, plus a 5th company that's more mysterious. And what have I been doing behind the scenes of this podcast? But first, if you value the content on Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and To the Bat Poles, if these shows have helped you get a new perspective on something or discover something new, help us keep going with a monthly donation via Patreon. If you pledge at least $3 a month, you can access additional content on Patreon. For more information on becoming a patron, go to patreon.com/deconcomics. If you'd rather send a one-time donation via PayPal, use the email address donate@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support in keeping the show going.
I'm Batman.
And I'm Robin.
This is Tim.
And this is Paul.
To the Bat Poles! The iTunes reviews are in on To the Bat Poles podcast. These guys do a good job, writes Acello. Who knew that the Batman TV show was such a wellspring of insight into Hollywood trivia, 60s counterculture, sexual mores, and even musical analysis? The Young brothers know their stuff, says Professor Allen. It is a great mix of nostalgia, analysis, and fun. Highly recommended. You've heard the reviews, now try it for yourself. New episodes on the 1st, 3rd, and 5th Thursdays of the month on iTunes or Stitcher, or at tothebatpoles.libsyn.com.
Batman, the answer to a policeman's prayer.
For nostalgia, analysis, and fun, it's
To the Bat Poles.
All right, I'm talking with Kumar down in Melbourne. He's been on pretty recently. You remember him. Hi, Kumar.
Hey.
And what we've brought
Imagine if I were that forgettable.
Yeah, so occasionally we mention that Kumar does translation for Dark Horse of manga. I was just looking at the manga that they've got out, and it seems like on average they put out like about 1 trade a week of manga. Sometimes they'll put out 2 or 3, and other times they don't put out any at all.
Right.
And actually, of course, the manga boom is now, like 10 years ago?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, do you get the sense that there's a lot less work in manga translation, or is it still...
There was a lot less, and there was certainly a period about 4 years ago. I'd say the boom years were 2004, 2005, and that's when I started. I think I did 2002 I did my first. And the real boom was around that period and then up through to about 2005. And at that stage, printing manga was like printing money. It was just selling like crazy. But then then a couple of things happened about 4 years ago. There was a big bookstore chain which collapsed.
Oh, Borders?
Borders collapsed, and Tokyo Pop went under around the same time. And Tokyo Pop was the lowest paying. I mean, they paid $4 a page. And my feeling at that time was that the market was going to be, the industry was going to be flooded with $4 translators who, and I would not be getting work, and because of the Borders collapse, it was just everything was gonna fall apart. And I thought, well, that's it, that's kind of the end of the road. But I think the market stabilized, and it's kind of now it's at a sane level. It's not the boom levels, and it didn't bottom out to nothing. It's just at a normal, I'd say, fairly healthy level. Enough so that I'm back to translating full time, which for 2 or 3 years, more than 2 years, for about 5, 6 years there I was not. I'd gotten out and gone to a day job. But for the past year and a half now, I've been back at it full time, and the work's fairly steady.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So what have you been working on lately? What's come out that you translated or whatever?
Okay, well, there's actually a ton of stuff because I'm now working for 4 companies.
Oh, wow.
Kind of a 5th.
Okay.
I'll tell you what's up. And the one odd thing is, well, we'll get to it, but okay. So for Dark Horse, the kind of the big one is a series called I Am a Hero.
Oh yeah, they were featuring that on their site. I saw that.
Yeah, so it's about this manga artist who's really socially inept, practically a shut-in. He's not actually a shut-in, but because of his lifestyle of just being locked in a room drawing manga, he's an assistant. Sorry, he's not a proper manga artist. He's an assistant. But he's working super long hours, and he's often a sleazebag with women. He has a girlfriend, but he's still kind of going to these singles mixers and stuff like that. And but one odd thing about him is he has this otaku thing where he owns a gun, and he goes to shooting practice.
How did he manage to get one of those in Japan?
That's kind of an issue. The thing of the series is he is one of the rare people who owns a gun license in Japan because he uses it for target practice. You're allowed to get one if it's for target practice or hunting. So he owns a rifle and he owns a license, but he refuses to use his rifle. What happens is there's a zombie apocalypse or a zombie outbreak, let's say. Tokyo goes berserk. This guy he's not really a survivor, but he owns a gun. But he refuses to use it for the most part because it would be illegal for him to get it out or illegal for anyone else to touch it and stuff like that. And he follows the letter of the law, like he's really uptight about. Even when everything's going to complete hell, he still follows all the rules. So Dark Horse is putting those out in 2-in-1 volumes, so each one's about 450 pages because it's 2 of the original. And the first one has just come out, and I think they're going to be on a biannual schedule, so every 6 months we'll get another one of those. And I've already submitted scripts for everything up to Japanese Volume 6, so English Volume 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure when the next one is coming out, but anyway, that's right now it's my favorite thing that I'm working on. It's a super funny, crazy series, just bonkers, really violent, but it's funny, and it's all kind of all about the Japanese cultural response to a crisis. It's almost like if you read reports about the Aum Shinrikyo gas attack on the subway and how people were just like standing around, going, what's going on, and not really freaking out. It's kind of, I think he kind of picked up some of that vibe and is putting it in, and people are like, they don't really know there's a zombie thing going on, or they don't believe what they hear on the news, or they think it's going to be over in a day or two. And it's like, whatever, we'll be home in a day. Don't worry about it.
I see. So it's not people running down the street screaming.
No. Some people are. If people are being attacked, they're running down the street. But other people are like, what? They've just heard about it on the news, and they're just like, whatever. We'll be fine. We'll be home in a day or whatever. The other things I'm working on for Dark Horse are both licensed. So one is called Psycho-Pass Inspector Shinya Kogami. And this is based on an anime series called Psycho-Pass, which had 2 seasons, so I guess 24 episodes or something like that. But it's about the future, and the government has a system where they can discover if a person is what they call a latent criminal by scanning them. They have these scanners that can detect what they call a person's hue, and if it's a certain rotten color, it means they're about to commit a crime or something, so they arrest them before they commit the crime, basically. Or as soon as their hue goes bad, they end up getting arrested and they have to go into therapy or counseling to correct. So that series is kind of a prequel, or the manga series that I'm working on is a prequel to that anime series. And the other one I'm working on for Dark Horse is called Fate Zero, and it's also licensed, so it's based on a light novel series. Do you know what a light novel is?
Light novel. These are like not comics. They're just prose.
Yeah, they're prose novels. It's a Japanese thing. They're usually short novels, like 120, 150 pages, aimed at teens, and they tend to be serials, so like 7, 10 volumes, something like that. So it's a huge thing, and it's this huge medium in Japan, the light novel. So anyway, there was a light novel of this series, Fate. There's a couple of different series involved. There's Fate and Fate Zero, which is another prequel. And that was an anime series, and there was also a manga, and I'm working on the manga of that for Dark Horse. I'm working on a lot of licensed stuff at the moment. I'm not sure why that is the case, but it is what it is. So this is a series about this event called the Holy Grail War, where there's oh my God, how do I describe this? There's this mystical device called the Holy Grail. It's probably not the biblical Holy Grail. And there are these three families that it will grant wishes. So these three families are, I think every 60 years or something, the Grail War occurs, and there are these three families competing to win it so that they can make their wish, whatever that is. So, but the way they do that is they have these mages, so wizards, and there are always 7 competing, and they're kind of chosen, the 7 competing wizards are chosen by the Grail. And those wizards summon up heroes from the past as what they call servants to fight on their behalf. And those servants can be actual historical figures or even fictional historical figures, which is a bit weird. But you get people showing up like King Arthur or Alexander the Great. And they get summoned into these different, it's very kind of video game, it's got video game specs all over it. So they're summoned into what's called a class, so like the Rider class or the Lancer class or the Archer class or stuff like that. And then there's this big super mega battle that goes on for multiple volumes. So that's the third series I'm working on for Dark Horse. And I've also started working since last year. I've been working for a company called Yen Press. And for them, I've also been working on another licensed series called How to Raise a Boring Girlfriend. This was also a light novel series that was adapted into an animation and is also in manga form. And the manga is about this kid who's a hardcore otaku for manga, video games, anime, all that stuff. Very typical, or what you'd imagine an otaku, Japanese otaku to be. And he decides he's going to, he wants to make a video game to sell at Comiket. And that, in order to do that, he needs to recruit his friends. He needs to convince them to work on the game with him. So there's one of his fellow high school classmates is actually secretly kind of a moonlighting novelist, light novel writer who's actually gotten rich from it already. And another is an old friend he grew up with who's drawing comics. But they all have he already has kind of backstories with them and reasons that they dislike each other and stuff. But the characters kind of fit into kind of what they typically do in these types of stories. Like we were talking about haiku kind of stuff with One Punch Man. It's very similar. Like one of the female characters is like a childhood friend. So like there's most of the characters fit into a sort of an archetype of competing for the affections of this guy, although there's not much romance in it really. It's very hard to see how it's going to play out. But so 2 volumes of that are out, and I should have mentioned that 2 volumes of Fate Zero are out as well, and none of the Psycho Pass ones have come out yet.
Yeah, I was looking at Dark Horse, and the first one's scheduled for November 9th.
Okay, all right, there you go. All right, what else? So that's 2 companies down. Fanfare, at the moment I am not working on something for Fanfare, but I just had a book come out called Guardians of the Louvre. It's a Jiro Taniguchi book, which he, as far as I know, my understanding is Fanfare is the only publisher of Jiro Taniguchi in English at the moment. They have some sort of exclusive agreement, I think. Or it seems that way because nobody else is publishing Taniguchi stuff, even though it's really quite lovely. But this was a manga project that was actually commissioned by the Louvre because for some reason, they had this manga art project thing, and they commissioned, I think, 4 or 5 different manga artists of very different styles to make single volume works about the Louvre, and this was the one that Taniguchi produced. And this one, through some sort of publishing arrangement, was also co-published with NBM Publishing, who have been a long-standing indie publisher. They've been around forever, and I never in my life imagined I would have anything to do with them, yet somehow now I have a book out from them with my name in it. This is a book that's very similar to, if you've ever seen Woody Allen's Midnight in Paris, I think that's what it's called, but in that movie, Owen Wilson character goes to Paris, and each night he ends up meeting characters from the past, like Ernest Hemingway or stuff. Just, he ends up going back in time. Just, he just like wakes up and he's back in time, and there's no kind of explanation for it. And Guardians of the Louvre is very similar. He meets Van Gogh, or other famous artists just from being there, without any real explanation. And he does kind of meet maybe the goddess Nike or someone like that. So there's some sort of magical thing, but he's kind of feverish at the same time too. So maybe it's all a fever dream, whatever. But that's a really lovely, beautiful book, and I think they printed it at the full, like a large size, not like a normal manga size. And it's probably on a hardcover. I don't have my copy yet, so I'm sketchy on the details, but it just came out, I think, within the past month or so. Yep, and the last one, sort of the last one, is Vertical. So I'm working on 3 series for them.
Wow.
Actually, I should say 2. One of them has finished, Knights of Sidonia. Volume 15 just came out, and it's the final volume, and it's a great series. I recommend everybody get all 15. It's kind of the space opera. It's got a little bit of a Macross vibe about it, or Star Blazers, or that kind of Yamato, that kind of thing, where they're up in space and the little ships are going out and fighting. But it's really weirdly bonkers. Like, there's kind of a love triangle, but one of the characters is a hermaphrodite, or is non-gendered. And meanwhile, then this kind of tentacle creature comes into being and kind of goes around by forming these tentacles, but they're super obscenely shaped tentacles, and yet the main hero kind of seems to be forming a romance with this 6 foot tall tentacle as well. And it's just wild. And there's all sorts of crazy space battles and stuff, and it's super fun, and I absolutely loved working on it. I'm very sad that it's over. But I think the Volume 15 just came out a couple of months ago. The other thing I'm working on for Vertical ongoing, which I mentioned on the One Punch Man episode, is a series called Tokyo ESP, which is almost like a manga, a Japanese take on X-Men. So it's about all these people. For some reason, these glowing fish appear. And when one goes into you, it awakens your latent superpower. So people start getting all these wild superpowers, and then it's very much it's kind of almost an American style manga in the way that it's about super. It's almost, I feel like the creator might have been influenced by like the wave of superhero movies that have come out. But it's very much about this high school girl. It's very she has low self-esteem or whatever, or she's insecure. And then she gets these powers, and there's lots of characters in it, and lots of slapstick comedy, and lots of although almost most of the main characters are female, there's lots of the fan service in it is kind of interesting. Like, it's usually if they end up in a bikini, it's like because somebody forced them to wear it, and she's always like, God, why do I have to wear this thing? I hate this. So that's quite interesting. And volume 5 has just come out of that, and those are also 2-in-1, so each one's about 400 pages. And they are coming out bi-monthly, so the next one is coming out in August. That's a pretty neat series. And the other one, I'm working on something new for Vertical. I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to talk about it yet, so
okay.
Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should. But maybe next time we'll talk about that one. But yeah, I've started a third series for them, or sorry, second, because Knights of Sidonia is done, so I'm starting another one for them in a couple of months. And the last thing, besides those 4 companies, and I'm not. I don't even know if I'm allowed to mention this one out there, but I did work on. Okay, I'll keep it as vague as possible. I worked on, for the first time, I worked on an anime series. I translated 2 or 3 seasons for a streaming service.
Okay.
But there's almost no point in talking. They haven't told me if I can talk about it or not yet. And I've been Googling around online, and nobody seems to know that further seasons. Okay, another clue is this streaming service already has 3 seasons of this show on it. And people were saying, why are there only 3 seasons? Well, now you're going to get, I think, at least 5 more seasons of that. Because I worked on 2 or 3 of them, and another friend of mine worked on the other few. So those are the hints I'll leave for that.
Okay, I see. All right, so, yeah, to be continued.
Yeah. And I will say, Adam, I'm going to San Diego.
Oh, wow.
This month. Yes. So.
Okay, that's why you said you were going to be away. I didn't know that was why. Okay.
Yeah. Because I don't know. I just thought it's been a long time, and last time was 2004, and I thought, it just seemed the stars aligned, and it was like, okay, this year I'll go. It wasn't hard to get a pro badge. It was impossible. I couldn't get on any panels. And when I went to San Diego last time and I applied as a pro in 2004, there was like a tick box on the form. It was like, would you like to be on a panel? What would you like it to be about? Now it's like, not a hope. And I can't imagine, because I was on the the Facebook page and stuff, and I'm looking at people who aren't pros trying to get badges. They're now on a raffle system, basically. It's like, good luck getting one. It's almost impossible. And I saw people saying, I've tried 5 years in a row and haven't gotten tickets or whatever. So,
wow.
Geez, if you can get in as a pro, do it. But even then, and unfortunately, a lot of my editors are not going to be there this year, because it's as I discovered after the fact, I think this weekend right now, Anime Expo is happening in Los Angeles. And I think more of those manga-focused companies are going to Anime Expo instead of San Diego Comic-Con, because I think they're just getting lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, San Diego is so big with all the Hollywood stuff and
right.
Yeah.
And everything really. It's not just the Hollywood, it's everything about it. It seems to have become a huge mess. So I don't know. So anyway, yeah, very few of my contacts are going to be there. I think only 2, unfortunately, this time around. But I kind of felt, and also I was like, really, should I have gone to Anime Expo instead? But the other thing is, depending on what happens in November, I'm probably not gonna, I'm probably gonna avoid traveling to the States for the next 4 years at least. So, I kind of figured, well, maybe this will be the last hurrah. I'll go to San Diego once more, experience it at least, and at least sit in on the panels and enjoy the show for what it is.
I see. So not any particular goal other than just kind of drinking it in, huh?
Well, yeah, I found it's really good. The few chances I've had to meet editors face to face has been really great. Like, even if you have a great relationship through email, I found just sitting down and having lunch with them, which I've been lucky enough to do once or twice, or meet them in person, is great. And when I went to TCAF last year, I ended up getting work. That's how I got the work from the Yen Press. The Yen editor just approached me face to face and said, we'd like you to work for us. So I was kind of, and I'm still trying to get into Viz. Like for 12 years now, I've been trying to get work at Viz, and that hasn't come to pass. So, maybe I can meet someone at that Viz booth that maybe the magic will happen this time. I don't know. So I do have professional hopes, and I am going to meet with two of my editors there, which I'm really looking forward to. So yeah, it's not all pleasure. I'm certainly going for the business end of it as well.
I see. Okay. So what have I been doing?
Yes.
I don't know. Do you have any questions for me to start me off?
Well, I do want to know what's besides. I mean, what are you doing? Any comics related stuff?
Well,
besides the
which podcast,
is eating up your time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so as I've mentioned on the show before, so I had a full-time job on a U.S. base here in Japan. From which I was laid off, like it's been 2.5 years ago now already. I was working for an educational contractor. And at that point I said, okay, well, I'm not going to let myself get kind of lost in another full-time job. I'm going to kind of do what I need to do to make money while I'm ideally leaving more free time for myself to work on podcasting and try to at least make, I don't know if making a living off of it might be too tall an order, but at least make a noticeable amount, so that it makes a difference in my budget. But I don't know. I'm running into several problems. Part of it is that I'm just marketing and networking are not where I'm strong.
Sure.
And I haven't quite figured out a way to do those things. I get so busy with actually making podcasts, especially now that I'm doing 3 a week. Because every week I've got a Deconstructing Comics, I've got a Machigai podcast, my English study show for Japanese people, and either Critiquing Comics or To the Bat Poles, because they come out on Thursday. Critiquing Comics is second and fourth Thursday, and To the Bat Poles is first, third, and fifth Thursdays of the month. So I've always got one of those every week, plus the other two that are weekly. And so that takes up a lot of time just making the darn things.
But To the Bat Poles is going to reach a natural end, right? Once you hit the 100th episode.
Well, yeah. I mean, when we run out of Batman shows to talk about, although we've been doing special episodes too, which interestingly tend to be more popular than the ones where we talk about particular Batman episodes. We get more mail about those and generally more downloads than when we talk about, Egghead or Clock King or whatever. So which gives us incentive to do more special episodes, which then lengthens the run of the podcast. I'm figuring that we've probably got another 2 years easy of, going at the rate that we're going.
Okay.
So yeah. And if we ever do finish, I can imagine maybe doing a different TV series after that, but we haven't decided which one.
But the show used to have ads in it right? And now it doesn't? Like,
Deconstructing
a long time
Comics?
back. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I've never talked about this on the show, but yeah, so for a while I was using the promos from the Comics Podcast Network, of which we're a member. But the thing was, I didn't really have any knowledge that most of those shows were running our promo. So at some point I just said, screw this. And then I was running the To the Batpoles promo pretty much every week. And then I was approached by Shortbox Showcase podcast, and they wanted to swap promos. So I said, okay, let's do that. And then he pointed out, Professor Allen, he's the name he goes by. He pointed out that actually one Comics Podcast Network show, the Superman fan podcast, was still running our promo.
Oh, wow.
So I said, okay, well, I guess I'd better run his. So I've been running that one. So I'm still running one of those two or the To the Batpoles every week in the middle of the show.
But there's no income from the ads.
It's just no. Well, there was one time several years ago when a guy who was doing a comic did pay something to have an ad in the podcast.
Okay.
Like for a month
One
or something.
time. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I don't know. My memory is not so good these days. I'm struggling to remember his name or the comic's name. Oh, I think it was the one about having a baby.
I don't know. I was about to guess it was Kill Shakespeare because those guys were all over the place.
No, they wanted free publicity.
Right.
And so what we ended up doing was trashing their comic on the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah. So hang on a second. I can look up the name of that comic. Oh yeah, it was 5 Pounds and Screaming.
Okay.
Which was meant to refer to a baby, but it sounded to me like a horror title. To some people that might be a horror title about having a baby, but anyway. So yeah, there hasn't been much in the way of advertising. Well, for a while, Comics Now was providing store credit as a sponsor. And yeah, that lasted for a few years, but then they went out of business.
Okay.
I think around 2009 or so. I think
probably due to advertising on podcasts with 200 listeners.
That could be. Well, yeah, I'm sure that the economic crash around that time helped to do them in. So yeah, we had a sponsor there for a while, but that's been quite a few years ago now. But yeah, if anybody wants to sponsor, we do have more than 200 listeners now. So
you've got 3 podcasts on the go. That's like a lot.
Yes.
two of them are basically comics related.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, so I'm not doing a full-time job, but I'm doing so many different part-time jobs that I sometimes wonder what the difference is.
Right.
Although, well, the nice thing is, my sort of main job is assistant language teaching in a high school, which is, so this school year, which in Japan it starts in April. This school year I'm doing that 3 days a week, and I managed to get a job where I'm working directly for the school and not through a dispatching company, which means that I get paid even in the vacation months.
Great.
And I'm getting paid by the month and not by the class taught or the day taught. So that's an improvement this year. Okay, cool. And I still have the vacations. So, as we're recording this, I'm just on the cusp of a 2-month summer vacation from that job, but actually getting paid.
Great.
So, So that will give me somewhat more time to put into additional things like getting ahead on the podcast or trying to market it. Or last summer, I spent a lot of time on trying to promote my self-published English study book.
Yeah.
And I did a couple of events for that, which went okay, but wasn't really what I was hoping for. But that sopped up a lot of my vacation time last year.
Right. And how do you feel about my constant negative feeling that people won't listen to a podcast about indie comics, which I bring up every time the number of listeners comes up?
Well, I mean, I'm sure
do you
there's
disagree?
Well, there's certainly a ceiling.
Okay.
There's no doubt that there's a ceiling, but I think that we could be getting more than we're getting. Because when I get feedback, and by the way, listeners, I'd like some more feedback. When I do get feedback, it's generally positive, and so it makes me think that that there must be more people who would enjoy the podcast if they found it. There are so many comics podcasts, and
Yes.
some of a lot of them are the Wednesdays Stack podcasts, and some of them are not all that great, and it's kind of hard to sift through all that and find the ones that you'll like, I guess. Also, I may have mentioned before, I wonder a little bit, this podcast is pretty variable in terms of the kind of things we talk about.
Yep.
And whereas, to the Bat Poles, it's a pretty obvious, narrow topic, which tends to get more audience reaction.
Yes, I remember reading something it was a long time ago, but I think it might still be true about doing a podcast or a blog, is to have a focused topic and stick to it. Mm-hmm. So instead of covering manga and European comics and mainstream and independents and undergrounds, you should just choose one and stick to it, and you get a bigger listener base. But who wants to do that?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, I've been stubborn about doing it on my terms, I think. I mean, I certainly don't want to do another superhero podcast. There are too many of those. Yes. And I don't really want to do just manga. Yeah. And, sometimes our topics are more kind of, creator issues, like doing a convention or getting funding or things about actually making comics too, and I like to dabble in those kind of topics too. Oh, by the way, as far as doing comics related things, I forgot to mention, I wrote an English study comic.
Okay, interesting.
Which it took a while for me to figure out how to make it available. There are 2 issues which are available on iTunes. Or iBooks, I guess I should say, to be more precise. But you can find it in iTunes also. And it's available worldwide. It's not just in the Japanese store. It's called Machigai Manga.
Okay.
And of course, Machigai it's mistake in Japanese. And, my whole kind of English study podcast book, whatever, empire, in all lowercase letters, empire, has been built on the idea of correcting specific English mistakes that many Japanese make. Mm-hmm. And the idea being, if you're able to correct those mistakes, then overall the quality of your English will be better. And so in this comic, it's about me and 4 students who appear to be kids. I haven't really decided exactly how old they are. They're shorter than I am, but perhaps they're high school students. And it's sort of a kind of free-flowing sort of scenario where we're in the classroom and then suddenly we're in Canada and then suddenly we're someplace else. And to just kind of fit whatever topic I want to touch on, what particular English mistakes I want to touch on. And so, yeah, and when I was looking for an artist, I was really pleased to get Hirabayashi Tomoko to write it. I mean, I just asked her to recommend somebody, and she said, well, I've got time.
Wow.
So she drew 2 issues. She didn't want to draw any more unless there was income, and so far there hasn't really been much in the way of income. I also sold copies of issue 1 of that and the English study book I self-published last year. I sold at Komitia here in Tokyo in May, and I'm going to do it again in August, which I just talked about on last week's episode. So I got some specially printed up. Otherwise, it's just available electronically. And the English study book is available both electronically and in paper on Amazon. And that's called I Can't Eat Natto, which is based on one of the mistakes where, it should be, I don't like natto, but sometimes Japanese say I can't eat natto as if it's like physically impossible to eat it.
Right.
So, I mean, these things are out and bringing in a little trickle of money. Yeah, so I got a little experience with writing a comic for someone else and, communicating to them in Japanese what I wanted in the comic. So that was interesting. But yeah, I don't have plans right now to do another one. I'm trying to figure out how to get more readers for what's available. Yeah, okay. So I'm keeping myself very busy.
All right.
If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast or just want to send us some feedback, send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. Also, if you're working on a comic of your own and want some constructive feedback, send it to us and Mulele and I will critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send a PDF or a link to mail@deconstructingcomics.com, and please try to keep it to about 30 pages. We released an episode last Thursday right behind this show in the feed. Listen for our discussion of an enjoyable reminiscence on childhood and some ingenious but problematic fold-out comics. This coming Thursday on To the Bat Polls, Paul and I discuss the 1966 Batman show's biting political satire as Penguin and Batman take their rivalry to the Gotham City mayoral race. Look it up in iTunes or Stitcher. To the Bat Polls is released on the 1st, 3rd, and 5th Thursdays of the month. Before we wrap this up, just a shout out to listener Mark Stokes, whose webcomic Zombie Boy has been nominated for a Harvey Award for Best Online Comics Work. I checked it out and it's a beautifully drawn strip. You can look at it at zombieboycomics.com. The award is decided by an online voting process, so if you'd like to cast a ballot, go to harveyawards.org. The deadline is August 8th. Deconstructing Comics is on Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, and Patreon. All our social media links can be found on the right sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com. Also, please give us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And, once again, our email address is mail@deconstructingcomics.com. Our theme is from bensound.com. Next week, Kumar and I discuss another manga title, a somewhat older one that you might not have heard of, XL Saga by Rick Dokoshi. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.